Hello and welcome to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. I'm Cynthia Mendoza, Communications Coordinator, and I am here with Bernadine Caparel. How are you, Bern?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're at a different location today.
Obviously.
Right? This isn't our typical location. You want to tell us a little bit about where we're at today?
We are at NMSU in the Branigan Library with our two guests. We have with us Teddie Moreno today, who was also a guest a little while ago. And we brought her back because she did that well. And Jennifer Olguin, and they're going to talk about some very spooky things today.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves to begin with?
Sure. Well, you've met me before.
Yes.
I'm Teddie Moreno. I work here at the archives. I've been here 12 years, and I help process the collections. I also respond to pretty much all the emails and telephone calls that come into the archives, and I send them out to who can answer them best. If it's not me, then it's usually Jennifer or another one of our great archivists.
Who are those calls usually from? Do you guys have people from other universities calling, or?
Yes, yeah, different universities call, authors call,
Wow.
a lot of authors, and usually those go to
cool.
Jennifer because they want historical information from the surrounding areas.
Right.
We have people calling about our political papers, and
Wow.
those go to our political archivist, Dylan
Cool.
McDonald, who you guys will meet later today. If somebody's looking for university archives, they'll go to our university archivist, or if they're looking for photographs, then they'll go. But it's, it just depends. One day they'll all go to one person, and
Right.
it's there's a
So
lot.
much involved.
Fun day every day,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very different. How about you, Jennifer? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as
Yeah,
well?
so I'm Jennifer Olguin. I am the Rio Grande Historical Collections Archivist. It's a mouthful, so usually I'll just say RGHC. I've been with the library for forever. I started off as a student back in '04, and I was a work study student stamping the property stamps of NMSU Library. And then I graduated with my undergraduate degrees here from NMSU in '08. And I applied for a full-time position here at the library. I got that. And I decided in 2010 I needed a change. And so I applied for the archives position. I had no idea, what the archives was. It was always a mystery to me. And I would see these people go up the elevator, and I'm like, where do people go, And so I applied for the job. I got it as a library specialist.
Cool.
Did that for, I would say, 5-7 years. And then I'm like, you know what? Why not go pursue a library profession? So I enrolled in an online library program.
Cool.
I got my master's in, I think, 2018. And fortunately enough, there was a vacant position. They had to do a national search, of course, and I was able to wow them, I suppose. And so I got the position in 2019. And I've been the archivist since then. So I've been here at the library for quite some time. I've seen my fair share of spooky stories and heard some odd things. But so I process the collections. I meet with donors. So I'm pretty much the person that deals with the regional, local history of the region.
Very
Oh,
cool.
Well, now that you mention it, it is like a October spooky episode, so yeah, we're excited to learn about some spooky stories.
I can't wait. We've been talking about this for a little while.
Yes.
And I'm so excited today's the day.
Me too. Can you guys start by telling us a little bit about the Branigan Library?
So Branigan Library is named after the former president of New Mexico A&M College. Dr. John Branson, or John W. Branson, in 1953, it was named after him in 1953. The library was moved from Young Hall to a new building here. Dr. Branson served New Mexico A&M College for 28 years as an educator, a department head of mathematics. He also served as acting president to the college a couple of times and as president of the college. When he passed away in 1957, the Roundup newspaper reported that President Branson rarely approved of student dismissal from classes. However, those instructors who had classes on the day of his funeral were allowed to dismiss classes on the day if they wished to attend his services.
And I happen to have found an article on his death, which was notably front page news. He was such an important figure here in the Las Cruces Sun News in 1957. He made the front page, Dr. John W. Branson, former president of the New Mexican A&M College, and so on. But that will have Jacob will set us up with that after. I also have an easement with his name on it. It's so much easier when you're an adult, because we did one on Billy the Kid recently. I couldn't find anything because he never married in the county, never owned property in the county. But J.W. Branson is how it's signed. So that's kind of cool to have his signature.
We're here today in the Rio Grande Historical Collections unit. So here in the archives, we have 4 different units. As Teddie kind of touched on earlier, we have the Rio Grande Historical Collections, which will be featuring today 2 different collections. But typically we have here records of organizations, personal papers, and other published materials that correspond to the region that share the cultural heritage and history of New Mexico and the Spanish borderlands. So we have been providing access for the last 50 plus years to students, researchers, and the community at large. Back in 2022, we celebrated our 50th anniversary here. Wow. So we had a celebration. We had a evening event where we had panel speakers talk about the establishment of the Rio Grande Historical Collections. We had one of the first archivist here, so it was nice speaking to him and him sharing his knowledge and how they first started back in the day. So again, people probably think, do I have to be a student or do I have to live in Las Cruces to come visit? No, we're open to the public Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4. But we'll provide a link to our hours of operation.
Great.
That way the public knows our hours. Today we'll be talking about 2 collections, the O.C. Hinman papers, and then also the Nelson Funeral Home records on today's podcast. I will turn it over to Teddie, and she'll talk about the O.C. Hinman papers and share a little bit of what she found.
So O.C. Hinman, his real name was Orson Clark, but he went by O.C. Hinman, and he had a furniture store in Silver City. He lived in Silver City for 56 years, so he was in the community for a long time. But his papers, we have them from 1886 to 1923, and mostly they were his furniture store business records. I guess somewhere along the line he decided he was going to start undertaking business, and so he started performing funerals as a service to the community. So when he first started, the laws in New Mexico didn't require a death certificate or a burial.
Wow.
Any kind of record. And so people in Silver City at that time, when he was first starting his undertaking business, there's no record of where these people are buried. And so we have his ledger. We have a ledger there, and you can see there's no. And Jennifer will go the difference between the 2 collections, but there's no markings like where these people are buried at. There's
it seems so strange today.
Yes, because the territory didn't require that until 1907.
Wow.
So these burials are from 1886, I believe, 1887, 1888. He did later on do the burials when the state required it, when the territory required it. And so Silver City has those records on microfilm, the public library, and so those probably meet requirements. But the ones we have, the ones we have do not meet the requirements. Wow. So those records they might have the person's name. They'll have, if he provided a robe or a dressing gown for the deceased, he would have the cost of that. Later on in the later records, he had grave dig on there listed for $5, right? Is that what we saw? It was $5 for a grave dig. He also had listed, if the funeral is a little bit more fancy, he might have a silk or a wool blanket and a mattress. I guess probably just a padding in the coffin. So he didn't provide any information about the person, what they died from. So it was a very minimal record. Most of his funeral records were just, I think, for record keeping for how much things cost.
Wow.
Very different than what the Nelsons did.
That's kind of crazy knowing that there's just people buried out there and nobody knows where they're at.
Nobody knows where they're at. So
Creepy.
No genealogical information. And so we'll send you a scan of one of his pages and also one of the Nelsons, so you can have that for the YouTube.
That's incredible.
So as Teddie mentioned, we will be going over the Nelson Funeral Home. So just to learn a little bit about who the owners were of the Nelson Funeral Home, and to give you a background information on the owners. So Herb Nelson arrived in Lake Valley in 1905 as a young boy. Upon graduation, he enrolled at an embalming school in Chicago and graduated in 1918. After graduating college, he returned to the land of enchantment and became the first embalmer in Hurley, New Mexico. Herb remained in Hurley for about 2 years, more or less, and then he moved to the West Coast. Not sure if he continued his career as a funeral director, but in 1926, he returned again back to New Mexico and became part of the staff of the Santa Rita Store Company as an embalmer and a pharmacist. So he had 2 roles there.
I love these combinations of jobs.
A jack of all trades, I
Yeah.
guess, right?
Yeah. I found this with O.C. Hinman, Furniture and Undertaking.
Oh.
It sounds like it's the beginning of a good joke.
Yeah. Well, it's because the furniture stores actually sold, or the manufacturers actually sold coffins.
Right.
Like,
Wow.
here's a couch, here's a coffin. Now, which one do you
Right,
want?
which one do you need? What do you
have
need
both of
today?
them, so.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. Like our other collection, we have the Amador Family Papers, and they ran a store. And so within their collection, we have the Amador trade catalogs, and within the catalog, there's caskets for sale. So there's like a brochure, like a couple brochures that have casket listings there. Because I mean, you couldn't have like the whole, like a sample, or you know, so you had to go through a book, I guess, at that time and order what you wanted.
Pick it out.
But that's another podcast on its own, the Amador family. But yeah, going back to the Nelsons. So in 1929, he met his wife Gertrude, and they had 2 children around that time. And believe it or not, Anne, she became the first woman in New Mexico to receive a funeral director's license. So she was a
Bravo.
trailblazer.
Yes.
Yeah. And the couple operated the Nelson Funeral Home here in Las Cruces from 1933 to 1965. So a good chunk of time that they ran that business. So Anne kept the business books and assisted with preparing the bodies of deceased children. But in 1968, they sold the business due to declining health. Also, due to the urban renewal, the business was torn down.
And you found something about that, right, Bern?
I did. I found the deed for when they sold it to
Oh, wow.
LC Urban Renewal. Here's the deed from J. Herbert Nelson and his wife. I think this is the son, actually.
They didn't have any sons, so I think they didn't have any sons, right?
Maybe the person that they were dealing with within the urban renewal, maybe, perhaps?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I've got that here, and Jacob will put it online for us.
Does
Thank
it say
you.
how much they sold it for? Just out
No,
of
the
curiosity?
deeds
Oh, no.
don't tell
Oh,
you the
no.
pricing. Yeah.
We'll have to look in our...
Because that was the home of Martin Loman before the
Before,
Nelsons
yes.
owned it. Yeah.
I bet you the information might be in the Las Cruces urban renewal records that we have here in the library.
Okay.
Yeah, they
There's
have
always
case
a way to
files.
find out, huh,
Yeah,
Jennifer?
Yeah, I'll have to dig in and see what we have. So people might think, well, how do you guys acquire these collections? But most of our collections that we have here are given to us by family members. But in 2017, we were given this collection by one of the daughters of the Nelson family. So it was given to us in 2017, and Teddie, she wanted to process a collection and make it available to the public. So she knows a lot about this collection. She is a person that we owe many thanks to helping us, get this collection processed.
Right.
So there's many steps that's involved. So she was able to do some research and find out a little bit more about the Nelsons. So the information I'm sharing here with you is brought to you by Teddie. She has great research skills, and she will find what she's looking for. If I have a question about something, in local history, I'm like, she's my go-to person. If I can't find it, if I get stumped on it, she's like, oh, did you check at this source? So yeah, all this information here, Teddie was able to find through different sources as well. So again, the Nelsons, their funeral home was one of the 3 funeral homes serving the Mesilla Valley in the 1930s. And it was located downtown, 1419 South Main Street, kind of like around, I guess, right, the Eichert's area, present day, like around that area, more or less, yeah. So the business served the Mesilla Valley for 30 plus years, and by reviewing their business records, they rendered services to thousands of people who resided in the region. And so the collection, you'll see here, this is a view of the boxes that they're stored in. So there's 15 ledgers that make up the collection, and so per each box, there's 2 housed in the box. And a good amount of information can be gathered from these record books. Many people might use them for genealogy research or for any other research purposes. We'll get questions, saying, my great-grandparents lived in the region, in 1940s. Do you guys have a listing on them? So that can be maybe like the beginning stages when you're doing research on your family. So this is a reason. This is maybe an area of help for people wanting to start their family research. Within the books, the Nelsons were very detailed, as we can see as we examine the books. Information can be extracted, such as the name of the deceased, the age, the residence, occupation, and by law, they were required to jot down these entries. And also the name of employer is also noted in the entries. The cemetery information, also the name of the individual who paid for the services, and also any payment arrangements that were made. Sometimes people couldn't pay for the whole service all at once, so the Nelsons made arrangements, with the family to pay in payments. There's a couple of entries that they'll say paid over telephone or whatnot. So it seemed like the Nelsons were really generous just by looking at the entries.
You want to tell us, Teddie, about maybe some of the interesting entries that you've found on there?
Yeah, actually I can't wait to tell you. So my very first story that I'd like to tell you about, one of the entries that I found, was actually involved John Branson. So John Branson, Christmas morning 1935, he gets a knock on his door, and he sees that it is one of his employees, Professor Wren Stone. So Professor Wren Stone, he answers the door for Wren Stone, and Wren Stone hands him a note, just like this. Hands him a note, and John Branson follows him out to his car, and he says, "Is anything the matter?" And Wren Stone says, "I've just killed Professor Oakes."
Oh my God.
And he drives away. And
That's
of course,
creepy.
Branson is shocked.
Yeah.
What else can he do? He calls the authorities. Well, Professor Floyd Oakes was another professor here on campus. He was an agricultural professor. And there's 2 stories. One says he was leaving the music building, and another story says he was exiting his car. So either way, still Christmas Eve morning, We're not sure well, let me just start. When Professor Stone was found, just minutes later, he was found dead in his car.
Wow.
Just minutes away from campus, with a bottle of poison in his pocket, and
my gosh.
a second note.
Oh, the mystery continues.
Yes, the second note says, I'll read it. The first note, by the way, was never made public. Just the first note in his pocket. The note in his pocket was never made public, but the note that he handed Branson at his door was made public, and I'm going to read you just a part of that. It says, "Gentlemen, you will find my grade book in my desk, all up to date. My insurance papers are in my safe deposit box. Thanks for your kindness in the past." Now, that...
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So we know from reading one of the articles in the Roundup that they followed up on getting somebody to replace Professor Stone and Professor Oakes' classes. They do mention that Professor Stone had a large class load. Very large class load, in fact. I think 2 teachers covered his classes. So he had a large class load. We don't know all the details what happened, but the second note did describe, the note found on Stone's body did describe that there was a feud between the 2 professors. Now what's interesting is that the Las Cruces Sun News did not cover this story.
Wow.
I found this story in the El Paso paper on Christmas Eve day.
I wonder why it wasn't covered.
It wasn't even covered in the roundup.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
But we do know that Professor Stone did not take the poison.
Oh, what did he die of?
Well, if you want to know, we're going to send you the link and you can read it on the resource page that we send you.
Okay.
Cool. It's a mystery.
And we'll put that link.
Mystery.
The poison saga continues. So, as I was going through book one, I just, I don't have the book with me all the time. So I was just starting, to look at some potential entries to share on today's podcast. And I automatically just open a book and I stumble across this newspaper article, Ill Health Causes Unknown Japanese Man to Suicide. So it was in 1937. And so you'll find out later how poison comes into play. So as I opened book one, which book one has a lot of added material to there, like they have newspaper clippings to validate like the entry, to give additional information. Sometimes there's like death certificates there also. So it just depends on the entry. Like I feel like as the Nelsons started their business, they had more supplemental information such as newspaper articles or death certificates and whatnot. So it helps to have that information. But as I was going through book one, I came across this newspaper article, and I learned that the unidentified male was 24 and he was Japanese, and he was found in a remote area near the El Paso boundary. And so the cause of death, as I was reading the article, it was determined to be suicide, and there was a note found in his pocket written in Japanese. And so the note indicated that he was tired of life because of his poor health. So in the note, the unidentified man requested the help of all Japanese living here in the vicinity to see that he was given a proper burial. So as I was continuing reading, and I saw in his entry that he was given a burial because there was a final amount listed. So his community came together and gave him a proper burial. But in addition, in the article, it was noted that a small quantity of poison was found on his body. During the investigation at that time, Sheriff Viramontes made a connection with California authorities to check if there was any missing men. I guess they made the connection with California because they were looking at his clothing, and they saw that the clothing was from a place that was being sold in California. So that's how they made the connection between the two. So again, due to the newspaper clipping, I was able to obtain information about the unknown person. And it was nice to know, like I said, that a proper burial was given, and that the Nelsons, they assisted in the funeral services, and a minimal amount was charged to make the services happen. So again, like within the pages of the records, there's many unknown people, but then there's well-known people as well that we may know about. So I will turn it over to Teddie, and she will share with us about George Griggs and let us know about who he was and what she found.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So you've heard of Griggs Street,
Yes.
right? So I'm not sure if Griggs Street was actually named after George Griggs or if it was named after his family, because his family had been around, a little longer than he had. So his George Griggs was born in Mesilla, and he died in Mesilla. He was born in 1866 and he died in 1939. His father came from New Jersey, believe it or not. He came from New Jersey, and he married into one of the most wealthy and prominent families in the border region, which was the Escarrete family, which I'm sure you've heard that name. And when George grew up and went to college, he graduated from a college in Colorado. He didn't go to school very far away. Colorado, it's far away, especially back then, but there wasn't a lot of colleges for him to go to school in his lifetime at that time. And so he went to school in Colorado, and immediately afterwards he went to Mexico. I guess he wanted to be closer to his mother's side of the family, so he went to Mexico and he became a Mexican citizen. And I didn't know that. I read about that. I didn't realize he had gone to become a Mexican citizen. And there's different stories saying that he was a governor of Baja California, Mexico. And then I didn't see, I had a hard time finding proof of that, but I've seen that documented in other stories or other articles about him, but I haven't been able to verify that in a legitimate source other than just other people repeating it. But while he was there, he studied among the Talamara Indians, and he wrote a dictionary about their language. He understood their language enough to write a dictionary for them. But he also became a postmaster in Mexico, and when Porfirio Diaz was overthrown, his government was overthrown in 1910, George Griggs had to flee Mexico, and so he did on foot and eventually made his way back to Mesilla. And he didn't let the dust grow, didn't settle under his feet. He got very busy doing a lot of things. One thing that he did later on in life is that he wrote the book called The History of the Mesilla Valley, or the Gadsden Purchase. And it's one of the mainstay books about Mesilla and the history of the Gadsden Purchase. And it's one that people use quite a bit and use as a resource. It's been printed more than once. But one of the things that he's not very well known for, and everybody in Las Cruces is affected by it, is that he is the one who set up the numbering system for our addresses.
Wow.
Everybody has an address because of George Griggs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Postmaster.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So he actually was not the postmaster.
Here.
He was not.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
That's amazing. Yeah.
So he substituted as a postmaster in Mesilla a couple of times. But to my knowledge, he was not the postmaster here. But the postmaster, I forgot, they mentioned his name, but they did say that that everybody had to do what George said, basically, do what George says. But in 1917, he produced a numbering system for addressing the homes. And so he went door to door and delivered numbers to every address. And the article that I read, it doesn't say if he had a volunteer that helped him, to help deliver. It just said that he went door to door and hand delivered address numbers to people to put on their addresses. But it described the article. My friend sent me this article. I read Las Cruces article. The Las Cruces paper had a very short article describing it, and it didn't go into detail that this El Paso article had. I'm glad my friend sent me this because it gives a little bit more detail. It says let me just read that. It says the geographical and civic center is the point where Main Street is intersected by Griggs Street. So that is like the epicenter of Las Cruces. And so when I looked at it on Google and looked at it from a map from Google Earth, it really is like the epicenter. I'm like, now how did he decide? How did that happen? That Griggs, was he somehow involved in naming the street and how those streets were laid out? I don't think so. I think that just happened to work out. But all the streets were to the north of that were in the 100, was just considered north, and they figured out right there is how they were going to divide everything. Right. And so that's how the streets got named, how north is North Griggs or North Main Street and South Main Street. That was because of his numbering system. And very few addresses have been changed. Streets have changed numbers. Sometimes they've had to, how people get upset when they've had to change addresses, especially businesses, because they have all their business cards and stationery printed. So it gets upsetting for people. So they don't like to change addresses. So it's been done very few times. But most people have had the same house address and the same numbering system, and that's been since George Griggs did that in 1917.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah. But besides that, he also had the biggest Billy the Kid museum. Memorabilia. He had a museum in Mesilla, and he had the most, items from Billy the Kid. And we all know Billy the Kid was an icon, still is an icon here in New Mexico. But this was according to our publisher of the Las Cruces Sun News at the time. His name was Wallace Perry. We have his collection here, by the way. It's another collection we have. We're always going to plug our collections. But besides that story of Billy the Kid that he has that information on, he also tells, Wallace Perry also tells about George Griggs owning this old hostelry in Mesilla. And this old hostelry was run down, and it had about, in the day, it had about 10 rooms that were rented out, and this hostelry was known as the Corn Exchange Hotel. Are you familiar with that?
No.
No. Well, over there in the corner on the pillow, we have a register for the Corn Exchange Hotel. And there's a lot of cool things in there. A lot of names that were written from, I believe, that
Wow.
1876 is when the first date is. Might be 1875. Jacob Shoblin's name's in there, by the way.
Wow.
I found it. But supposedly Billy the Kid's name, not in that book, but there's other registers. Billy the Kid stayed there. A lot of famous people stayed there, have traveled through there. But
It's amazing.
well, what's even more
Yeah.
amazing is that at some point, his great niece, I believe, ended up opening up a little tiny food establishment in this little building. And it continued to grow. And besides the great food that is served there, and it's along the haunted Camino Real Trail, and also what is known as the hellish Butterfield stage route.
Okay.
It's known as La Posta today.
Oh, look at that.
That building is known as La Posta today, and that register there was the register of one of the first. It's one of the first registers of that building.
Wow.
So all those names, like when you look through those names, you'll be able to feel those spirits. When you look through them, you see names that you recognize that our streets are named after.
Right.
Because there are people that lived here,
Right.
like Bowman and Melendres,
Wow.
Griggs.
It's
you'll-
funny,
they're so
when we
prominent
first
today.
started, we were speaking with Dennis, and the only thing I could come up with, how are we going to do this podcast?
Yeah, we
right?
had no idea where to start.
We were just overwhelmed with it, and that was the only thing I came up with. Start with street names because they're famous people.
They have to
Start
be
with the
named
street
for a
name.
reason, right? So
And Dennis gave us some tips, of course.
he
which
told
was
us to
great.
maybe
Yeah.
go to a grave and see some prominent names over there. We're like,
Yeah.
that one's a little scary. We might not do that one. We'll
Now
start with the
Now we're
streets.
Halloween specials.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Oh,
can end
cool.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, the Corn Exchange it's got some interesting things on it in the very front cover, which I've seen that book many times, but
Yeah.
I've never really looked at it with the same kind of purpose I looked at it this past couple of weeks.
Right.
But on the very front of the book, Augustine Davis, who was the first owner, her and her husband John.
Uh-huh.
There's like a little thing that I guess it was a thing back then for people to steal hotel registers. But she actually writes kind of like a little poem, "Do not steal this book."
Wow.
It's like a little ghostly poem almost that she writes on there, and she
Wow.
signs it. So we'll send you a scan of that, because
Yes,
that's kind of
please
cool
do.
too.
That is cool.
I didn't know that even existed until Teddie pointed it out a couple weeks ago. I'm like, yeah, and my first question was why would they put that? But maybe people were stealing that.
Was
I
it
wonder
thing?
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's
get a
strange.
record like who was here at a certain time.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool
So,
stuff.
anyways, but that's one thing is that he owned that. He owned La Posta before it was La Posta.
Oh, cool.
What was the woman who did the cooking?
Katie Griggs Camunes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I believe it's her maybe her great granddaughter who owns the restaurant now.
Okay.
Or maybe it's her granddaughter that owns the restaurant now.
Right.
I think they're celebrating like their 80th something, right?
Yeah, they're
85th,
celebrating.
I
They're
think it
celebrating
is,
an
yeah.
anniversary. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, they are. So 16 de septiembre, they just celebrated their
wow.
anniversary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very nice.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. It's such a iconic place here in Las Cruces, or Mesilla, I should say.
Yes, but I know, but we claim it too, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's ours.
we claim it
We
too
love
because
it,
we love the
yes.
food, right?
How cool.
Kind of make our segue to, I guess, the Wild West.
Yes.
So,
Our Billy the Kid
Yeah.
segue, yes.
so we have the entry. I found out the entry of Apollinaria Pauline Garrett. So you might think, who is that? So she was the wife of Pat Garrett. So as we all aware, Pat Garrett was a cowboy rancher and Wild West lawman that shot Billy the Kid. So she's recorded in one of the books, actually in book 1. I'll show you a picture here of her and Pat Garrett. It's really fuzzy, but again, I found this one online. I think it was on Find a Grave, I think. So I was like, well, let me do some research on Pauline. So I came across this book that we have here in Special Collections, The Story of a Western Lawman by Leon Metz, a local author. He mentioned in his book that Pat and Pauline's relationship occurred by accident. I'm like, how so?
Yes.
So
Explain.
Yeah. So it was described in his book that Pat was in the hog industry, and he was almost killed by a hog as it knocked him down and trampled him, which almost cost him his life. And so Pauline nursed him back to health, and that's when they married. But it kind of gets a little, I guess, weirder, I guess. So this was not his first marriage. Okay. Pat was married to Pauline's older sister.
Oh, boy.
Yes, so his
family affair.
But Pat and Juanita, which is Pauline's sister, they were speculated to have been married for like maybe weeks or even maybe months. But then Juanita died due to a possible miscarriage, but it's not confirmed. So they probably knew each other, but again, Pauline was there at the right time, right place, and nursed Pat back to health. But they had children, and of course, one of their daughters, Elizabeth, she composed our state song, "O Fair New Mexico." So yeah, I was trying to learn more about Pauline, and I used some census records to get an idea of like where they relocated at what time. So again, it indicated that Pauline and Pat, they moved together, obviously, and Pauline moved wherever Pat went. So in the 1880 census, Pauline was listed as keeping house, as a housekeeper, or keeping her house, as in Lincoln, New Mexico. And then in 1900 census, she was listed here living in Las Cruces. So 36 years after moving to Las Cruces, she passed away. And according to the newspaper clipping found in her entry, Pauline suddenly passed away due to cardiac thrombosis, also known as a heart attack. Which was listed as her cause of death in the Nelson records. Throughout the Nelson funeral home records, there's glued entries, or glued newspaper entries that offer a deeper insight on the individual. And in this case, it gave us information about Pauline and how she passed away and her impact it had on the community here in Las Cruces. And also, just browsing through the entry, I found out she was 75 years old when she passed away, and she was a widow, of course, and she was living at 223 South Raymond here in Las Cruces. So out of curiosity, I'm like, well, let me Google map this. So I looked on Google Maps, and the house still exists. So I wonder if people living there now, I wonder if they know, like, hey, this is where Pat Garrett's wife lived at the time.
Yeah.
So the house still exists. But yeah, there's a lot of great information that can be extracted from these ledger books. Again, just by looking at her entry, she was buried at the Old Oddfellows Cemetery, and her cost of funeral services came out to $237.50. We came across a lot of interesting entries within the Nelsons, and we've noticed some observations such as the terminology of medical verbiage has changed. For example, senility was commonly used, and now we recognize it as dementia. And also a lot of like coronary disease was more prominent back in the day as well. I guess we see it nowadays too, but a lot of heart disease is also recorded in the funeral home record books. Yeah. And then, as we can gather from the Nelsons, they're really generous people. They were really well known in the community. They belong to different civic associations. So I guess they lived up to that motto and were really generous and helped the community when that time of need came.
So how are they organized? Are they organized by year, by name, or how? I'm curious how that was organized.
So they're organized by year. Each box is organized by year, but the way the Nelsons did it is that they you want to grab one? Would you mind grabbing one, Jennifer? And I think I showed that to you. I'm going to leave it open on the page that Jennifer had it in. I believe that is that Apolina's?
I think it's the unknown
Japanese.
person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is the unknown Japanese person. Yeah. Okay. So you can see there's a newspaper. Thank you, Jennifer. That you can see there's a newspaper article there that also lists his name. But at the very front of the book, and there's one thing that I had to get used to doing, working in a library, we like things in order. We're very orderly. We like things in order, alphabetical order especially. We love alphabetical order. So people don't die in alphabetical order. So the books, their names are not in alphabetical order in the index. And so you'll have to turn to the G's, but then you have to scroll through all the names, and scroll's not the right word because we don't scroll with our fingers, but you have to go through each name to make sure that you are looking at the names because they're not in alphabetical order. So you might miss it. So sometimes you have to go through it twice to make sure that you catch those names. And so, it's one thing that we had to remember to do is just don't automatically think the name's not there if it's not at the top.
You really gotta
the name,
look.
if Garcia's not up at the very top of the G's, they might be down at the bottom.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Just comparing
details.
the 2 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has so much detail here. This person on the left.
Yes.
Has a religion and everything.
Yeah, they had family to fill in their information versus the unknown Japanese man who didn't have family to fill that out. And you can see the difference in the cost of their funerals, as Jennifer pointed out.
That's incredible.
Yeah, as we went through the different record books, I came across, actually book 1 is the book that I spent a lot of time with, just because that's a topic on its own. I was going through the pages and I came across back to back 2 entries that were recorded from 2 little boys, or I would say 11, 12-year-old boys. They were struck by lightning and they died, but they were struck by lightning working on their family farm, from what it seemed. So you see different types of deaths, and I would expect it, but back in the day, they would have to help out in the family farm, and just seeing that, I'm like, wow, that's so young, and then working out in the fields, and that's what happens. But those are just 2 that stand out, but there's probably many more there that we can encounter as we go through the pages.
And you guys said that actually happened a lot more often than you would think, the lightning strikes, right?
Yeah. So
incredible.
that's
And drownings.
Drownings,
Wow.
Children drowning in ditches and
car accidents.
Oh, it's sad, yeah.
they're really interesting. They're interesting. It was a really incredible collection to be able to process because you feel these people's lives when you're handling their stories. You're handling them, and the stories that we shared today. These people lived and died in this area. We're kind of sharing these stories and kind of making light for the podcast, but we really honor and we respect the families and appreciate that we were able to have these collections, and we hold our jobs. We take our jobs seriously. We don't want to make light of the way these people died. I think Jennifer feels the same way I do. When we're here working, we feel their spirits when we're working on these collections. Not so much the Nelsons, but some of the other collections. We feel like they're in here working with us sometimes, and then for that brief moment, and then we're ready to move on to the next collection and start working on that. But sometimes it's kind of hard to let them go, as you've heard me talk about the Shoblins. Everyone's heard me talk about the Shoblins. It's hard to let them go, and one day I will, but not yet.
No, I feel within my profession, I feel like it's my duty to preserve the legacy and the of people, and also protect the cultural legacy and of the area. And so I feel like working on these type of collections brings our stories to light. We want to share the stories of people that are not well known to people that are more influential and well known in society. So we want to be that place where you go and you see a representation of you or your family.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's what's so incredible and important about your guys' job is you guys are giving families opportunity to look back into their history and find out, just a little bit about what happened before they were here. So,
and that's kind of what this podcast is really about: respecting history and preserving it. Yeah, this is amazing.
It's awesome. Speaking of spirits, I guess since it is a Halloween episode, do you guys have any crazy stories to tell us?
It wouldn't be spooky with any right? If we'd have a scary, a spooky story. We have a one in particular that stands out. it happened a couple years ago. Teddy and I were here and on this third floor because the archives we take over pretty much the whole of Branson almost. We're on 4 different floors. But here today we're on the 3rd floor, and this side is restricted to the public. So you guys are getting a sneak peek, limited preview of the archives for the special edition. But Teddy and I, we were here. I think she had a question she had to ask me, and right across my office is what we call the memorabilia room. Mm-hmm. And I'll let Teddy take over the story because she says it way better.
Yes, we were talking about a professor who had just passed away. I mean, really just that weekend, I believe it was the following or maybe just the day before or something, he had passed away. And there was a director's chair in this closet. And so we have a lot of things in this it's not a closet, it's a memorabilia room. We have a lot of things in there, but one of the things we have in there are some cannonballs from Fort
I don't know
Selden,
what,
maybe? I
don't
think
know
they're
what
from Fort Selden.
It was, yeah.
But they're not live. They're, not live.
Right.
They're not live. So they're really heavy. In fact, when Jacob was here a few weeks ago, we had him pick one up. They're not light. They're like 5-7 pounds. They're about this size.
It takes a lot to move. It's not something that can easily move.
Right.
But it was on a pallet. And so we mentioned, this person passing away. And all of a sudden, this cannonball rolls off the pallet, only about an inch off. The pallet's probably about 3 inches high, and just rolled off and fell. It didn't roll anywhere else because it's so heavy it can't roll. So how it fell from the pallet to the floor.
Wow.
And we took off. We didn't stick around to see if it was going to roll anywhere else. We left. And I think we came back a little bit later. Did you end up moving it and putting it back in place? I know I did.
I can't remember. I probably went like maybe a couple days after because I didn't have the nerve or the guts to go. Yeah. But that's one thing that comes to mind. Yeah. But I used to stay here till 6:00 every night because I used to work 410s, and I changed my schedule. But anyways, people ask me, how do you stay here by yourself? I'm like, you know what? I have peace of mind that I think, I'm preserving their history.
Right.
I'm not here to bother anyone. I'm here to preserve their memory. So that's the peace of mind that I tell myself. But also back in the day when I used to stay late until 6, I would make sure I had my music on so I can have any noise that filter out. But yeah, because people come here like, wow, it has like a creepy feeling to it. Yeah. But I don't get that vibe just because I've been here for quite some time, Yeah. And I'm used to it. So yeah.
Well, they say our vault is haunted, and even when they moved from the old courthouse and brought all the documents over, it seems that the spirits have followed them. So you wonder about these pages at such a prime time in their lifespan, how much energy is still around.
Yeah, I think energy can kind of transfer to objects, so I mean, I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be haunted.
And you can see, like, I don't know if you guys noticed when you guys came out of the elevator, like both sides, jam-packed from, with archival documents. Yeah. So you just think about like a good number of these collections, the people that created these records are no longer living. Right. So you just think about it, this is, a lot of people's life and their history are within these boxes.
That's crazy. It makes you curious. So you guys said the Nelson home used to be located in the Eichard area?
Yeah, in that general area, yeah.
I've heard crazy stories about that building being haunted. Caroline actually mentioned that her mom used to, I guess, be a manager or something there. And they had a hard time finding housekeepers and stuff because they would just find stuff. They would feel stuff and they would just quit.
Exit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't blame them. There's probably a lot of stuff lingering there.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that.
Any other crazy stories you guys have from here?
Well, Jennifer, I don't know why she's not telling that one, but I don't know why she's being...
I'm trying to erase it from my memory now.
So her office used to be next door, so kind of diagonal from the elevator. Mm-hmm. And so when she would work at night, so first of all, when you come up in the elevator, you need a key to open up the third floor. Right. You cannot get to the third floor. I don't care what floor you're on, you cannot get to the third floor without a key. You have to have a key to operate the elevator to the third floor. You can go to the first floor, second floor, fourth floor, but it will never stop on the third floor without a key. When Jennifer would work here by herself, sometimes the elevator door would open up on the third floor and nobody would come out.
Wow.
Nobody would
I
come
always
out.
blame it on the faulty elevator, but that's what I'm thinking
That's
it
what
could
she
be,
tells
but
herself.
That's what I tell myself. But yeah, without that elevator key, it bypasses the third floor just because
Yeah.
security reasons. We don't want, people to wander to the third floor just because of the types of collections we have here in the
Because of the ghost.
we want to keep the ghost contained to my floor. But yeah, no, I remember that. Yeah, I would tell Teddie, guess what happened to me?
Wow.
Yeah,
That's creepy.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess it's something that I don't really think much of, just because where I work and stuff.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think you guys come in
Yeah.
peace. You're not trying to
Yes,
like do
Exactly.
anything
That's
crazy.
what I tell myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just preserving their stories, and that's awesome.
Very cool.
And again, if anyone's interested in viewing our different archival collections we have here, we'll share with you guys resources
Yes.
and the links. Like, for example, the New Mexico Archives Online. So this is where you will find all our finding aids listed online. Like, for example, the Nelson Funeral Home Records, we have a finding aid. So it's a detailed listing about the collection, who the Nelsons were, what the collection entails. It's a multi-page document. So all our collections that we have here have these finding aids. So you can, search from the comfort of your own home and do some keyword searches and find what we have here in the archives.
Wow.
So that Mexico Archives Online is a database that's shared with 19 other repositories around the state. So you can search at UNM, at different archival institutions. You can search and what they have as well, in case your research is not based here in this area. Yeah.
Cool. And where can people contact you guys if they have any questions, or if they want to maybe come visit and make an appointment? Where can they do that?
We like to refer our potential researchers or existing researchers to email archives@nmsu.edu.
Okay.
That way we all see the research requests come in case either Teddie or myself were out of the office. Someone will typically get in touch within 24 hours, except for the weekends, of course. But we're pretty quick, and thanks to Teddie, she filters out these research requests to the correct person, but she can answer, most of the time, the questions that come our way. So
Awesome.
And I think Jennifer's going to add our contact information and that also, that we'll send Jacob the resources. So
Sounds great.
Well, this was very
It
special.
was.
Yeah, I
I
love
enjoyed
being
it.
here.
Me too.
and we're very happy that you came to visit.
Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna have to do a little tour before we leave. I got to get a little one last time.
Do
but-
you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. I missed it the last time.
maybe we can have you guys back again for another visit, for another
Yes.
I would
Central
love
podcast.
that.
I'd love
Yeah,
that.
I would love that.
Absolutely.
There's many more potential, topics
Topics.
lingering.
We can do
around
this
the
forever.
archives,
Yeah.
Cool.
Lots of stories to tell.
Yes, definitely. So I want to thank again Teddie Moreno and Jennifer Olguin for joining us today. Thank you very much for hosting the podcast today. I had a lot of fun. So.
I did too. And I just want to borrow this book.
Just take it home for a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to browse.
Well, that does it for another episode of Preserving History and Democracy. My name is Cynthia Mendoza, and I am here with Bernadine Caparel, and we'll see you guys next time.